Throughout their careers, Jim Carrey and Jimmy Kimmel have always been beloved names in the entertainment industry, witty, bold, and unafraid to touch on politics. They've grown accustomed to satirizing conservative politicians with mocking laughter and sharp-witted remarks as a spice of late-night television on Jimmy Kimmel Live. But this time, those laughs went too far, and Caroline Leavitt, the youngest press secretary in American history, chose to respond without mercy. That evening, during the live broadcast, Carrey and Kimmel, with an air of disdain, mimicked Leavitt's voice, ridiculed her faith, and called her the White House's talking doll. They thought it was harmless entertainment, but they didn't know they had just ignited a confrontation they weren't prepared for. Every joking word, every mocking glance. She remembered them as if carved in stone, not to endure, but to strike back, and her response would silence all of Hollywood. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Under the dazzling studio lights, with upbeat music and meticulously orchestrated applause, everything carried the true spirit of a Hollywood-style political comedy night. The familiar sofa next to the host's desk was where stars once mocked every current issue, and tonight, the audience didn't just come to laugh. They came to witness a live showdown, a heavily promoted special episode, Politics Meets Humor. MAGA versus Hollywood. On stage, Jimmy Kimmel, the seasoned late-night host with his signature smirk, was ready for a verbal sparring match. Jim Carrey, the veteran comedian with explosive energy, sat ready in the guest chair, holding a sketch pad, waiting to draw his next satire. And caught between the verbal gunfire about to erupt was Caroline Leavitt, not a silver screen star, not a familiar comedian, but the youngest press secretary in history. Kimmel and Carrey saw Leavitt as an easy target, a young woman they believed they could take down with a few jabs about her age. But they didn't know they had just lit the fuse for an explosion. Kimmel, leaning back in his host chair, flashed a smug smile. "Caroline, let's be honest," he said, his tone like he was lecturing a child. "You're 27, right? At that age, people are still figuring out Instagram filters. And yet you're running the White House press room. Isn't that a bit like handing the keys to a spaceship to someone who just got their learner's permit?" The audience erupted, laughter echoing, some raising their phones to record, anticipating Leavitt's embarrassment. Carrey, standing by his sketch pad, landed another blow. He held up a caricature, Leavitt in a schoolgirl jacket, wearing a backpack, standing at the White House podium with the caption "Trump's intern." "Caroline, I gotta ask," Carrey said, voice feigning innocence, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Did you get hired because of a PowerPoint presentation about Trump in school, or because you knew how to write MAGA in perfect cursive?" The crowd roared with laughter, clapping wildly, some whistling as if watching a top-tier verbal showdown. Carrey shrugged, feigning humility, but his eyes betrayed his triumph. Leavitt sat still, hands resting lightly on her chair, her gaze sweeping over Kimmel and Carrey, like a strategist analyzing a battlefield. She didn't blink, didn't frown, just a powerful calm. Kimmel, noticing the unusual silence, gestured for her to respond. "Come on, Caroline, what do you think? Playing in the White House at 27, isn't that a bit overwhelming?" He tilted his head, expecting an awkward reaction, a moment where the young woman would stumble before millions of live viewers. Leavitt stood, walking to the center of the stage, the spotlight shining on her like a halo. She gripped the microphone, her voice ringing out, sharp and commanding. "Jimmy, you think 27 is too young to run a press room?" She paused, letting the audience hold their breath. "Then let's talk about how I've been working in the White House since 2019, when you were probably busy reading comedy scripts to chase views. Meanwhile, I've faced hundreds of reporters, answering questions you'd never dare dream of." Scattered applause broke out, catching Kimmel off guard, the smile on his face starting to falter. She turned to face Carrey, her gaze like an arrow piercing straight through. "And you, Jim, you draw me as a schoolgirl with a backpack. I've coordinated media campaigns for Trump, stood by him through every political storm, while you're just drawing cartoons for social media likes. If you want to talk about experience, look at your own career. It needs a boost more than I do." The audience gasped, applause drowning out the initial laughter. Some stood, cheering as if watching a boxing match. Carrey, pen in hand, froze, his eyes betraying a rare hint of embarrassment. Leavitt stepped closer to Carrey's sketchpad, pointing directly at the caricature. This isn't me. This is your stereotype of youth. But let me tell you the truth. Age doesn't define ability. I built my career on sweat and truth, not cheap jokes. She turned to the audience, her voice lowering, magnetic. I represent a young generation that doesn't wait for permission. We act, we win. And tonight I'm here to prove it. The studio erupted. The audience stood, clapping furiously. Kimmel, for the first time that night, looked flustered. He forced a smile, signaling the band to play a quick interlude to cut through, but the crowd was no longer his. Leavitt had won them over. Carrey, standing by his sketchpad, quietly folded the caricature, as if conceding his first defeat. Kimmel tried to regain control. Wow, Caroline, you're something, he said, his voice slightly off. But I mean, don't you think you need a few more years to, build experience? He shrugged, hoping the audience would rally back to him. But Leavitt gave him no room to breathe. Experience, Jimmy? She stepped closer to Kimmel's desk, resting her hand on its edge, locking eyes with him. I learned experience working 18-hour days, facing a left-wing press trying to twist the truth. I learned experience standing by Trump through every battle, from courtrooms to campaigns. And you? Your experience is reading comedy scripts, and thinking that's enough to take me down? She shook her head, her voice brimming with authority. I don't need more years, I've been ready for a long time. Leavitt turned to the audience, raising the microphone one last time. Youth is a weapon, not a weakness, she said, her voice echoing through the studio. I'm not here to be mocked, I'm here to fight. And you, Jim picked the wrong person to provoke. She set the microphone down, walked back to her seat, leaving the audience in a frenzy of cheers. In that moment, the stage belonged to Leavitt. She had turned their mockery of her youth into a blaze, burning through Kimmel and Carrey's arrogance. The studio shook with the aftershocks of Caroline Leavitt's razor-sharp comeback, transforming Jim Carrey and Jimmy Kimmel's age-based jabs into an overwhelming performance that captured the audience's hearts. Kimmel, though rattled, tried to maintain his seasoned host charm. Carrey, his confidence shaken, stood by his sketchpad, eager to land a new blow. Kimmel adjusted his tie, forcing a strained smile to mask his unease. All right, Caroline, let's talk about your unique approach to press, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. You've turned the White House press room into a TikTok stage, inviting influencers to dance around while dodging real journalists. Is that your grand plan? Running the press like a reality TV show? The audience burst into laughter, shouts of TikTok queen, echoing. Phones lit up as people recorded the moment. Carrey seized the moment, flipping his sketchpad to reveal a new caricature. Leavitt in sparkly influencer gear, holding a selfie stick, standing before a White House covered in hashtags like #MAGAVibes and #TrumpTalk. Caroline, I gotta hand it to you, he said, voice feigning admiration. Other press secretaries deal with boring newspapers, but you're running a social media circus. What's next? Live streaming briefings with a cat ear filter. The audience roared, clapping wildly. Carrey strutted across the stage, mimicking an awkward TikTok dance, sending the crowd into a frenzy. They were convinced Leavitt's media style was a joke. Leavitt sat still, her fingers lightly tapping the chair, her face calm like a lake before a storm. She wasn't just listening, she was analyzing every word, every gesture, turning their jabs into weapons. She paused at the edge of the stage, the lights surrounding her like a halo. Holding the microphone, her voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Jimmy, you call my press room a reality show? She began, her tone low but cutting like a blade. It's a revolution. While you're stuck in outdated media, I'm connecting with millions of Americans who no longer trust your real journalists. My briefings aren't for the elite, they're for the people. Kimmel froze, his hand tightening around his pen. Turning to Carrey, she pointed at the caricature. And you, Jim, think my style is a circus. Look at your own circus. Decades playing a clown, now just drawing for clicks. I don't need a selfie stick to make an impact. My voice carries further than your entire film catalog. Leavitt strode across the stage, each step asserting dominance. You mock me for inviting TikTokers. Those creators have an authenticity your media lost long ago. They're unafraid to speak the truth, unlike the newspapers you worship, which twist facts for their own gain. She paused, letting her words sink in. I've opened the White House to voices you ignore, the voices of real America, and guess what? They're listening. My posts get millions of views. Your show, Jimmy? Struggling outside the top 10. The crowd erupted, applause crashing like waves. Kimmel pursed his lips, fingers tapping his desk, clearly losing ground. Carrey, trying to reclaim the spotlight, jumped in. Come on, Caroline. You're not a press secretary. You're a fan page manager for Trump's fan club. Calling the press fake news doesn't make you smart. It just makes you a punchline. He pointed at the caricature, hoping to sway the audience back. But Leavitt was ready. She stepped toward the sketchpad, standing right in front of the caricature. A punchline, Jim. I'll take it. Because my punchline spreads truth faster than your drawings. And fake newsies. I call it what it is. Propaganda disguised as journalism. I face those reporters daily, exposing their bias, while you hide behind a paintbrush. She turned to the audience, her voice rising with passion. My job isn't to cozy up to lying media. I'm here to amplify the silenced. That's why I'm on social platforms, in the press room, because truth doesn't need a newsroom to exist. The crowd roared, standing, chanting, Caroline. Kimmel, caught off guard by the wave of support, tried to interject. All right, Caroline, but aren't you just chasing likes? You've turned the White House into a content factory. His voice wavered, betraying his unease. Leavitt spun around, her eyes blazing. Chasing likes, Jimmy. I'm speaking to people you don't bother with: workers, parents, veterans, people who want a government that listens. My content factory is stronger than your media empire. She held up her phone. Look, millions are watching, sharing my words, not yours. That's not likes. That's power. The giant screen behind her lit up with her posts, flooded with praise for her resilience. Kimmel, now flustered, tried to pivot. Wow, Caroline, you're passionate, he said, forcing a strained smile, but the audience was no longer his. They belonged to Leavitt. Carrey, silent for the first time, crossed his arms, the caricature forgotten. Leavitt returned to center stage, addressing the audience directly. This isn't about TikTok or hashtags. It's about taking back the narrative from gatekeepers like them, she said, pointing at Kimmel and Carrey. I'm not here to please them. I'm here to break the mold. And every American watching knows why. She dropped the microphone, the studio exploding in a standing ovation. Jimmy Kimmel, with a forced smile, tried to maintain his confident facade, but his eyes betrayed unease. Jim Carrey, standing by his sketchpad, no longer dancing, gripped his pen tightly, his gaze wary. Kimmel's eyes glinted as if he'd found an opening. Caroline, I gotta hand it to you, you've got energy, he said, his tone sweet but laced with intent. But let's talk about this. You're Trump's spokesperson, right? I mean, you follow him like a fan chasing an idol. Don't you ever think about standing on your own? The audience chuckled. A few clapped, sensing Kimmel's sly jab. He smirked, as if he'd just dropped a bomb. Carrey, sensing an opportunity, held up a new caricature. Leavitt in a Trump t-shirt, holding a giant Trump sign, standing behind a towering Trump figure like a monument. Caroline, I get it, he said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. Working for Trump must be like joining a cult, right? You just nod and say yes, sir, every day. When do you get to have your own opinion? Leavitt sat there, hands resting lightly on her lap, her gaze unwavering. Her face was calm, but a fire was kindling within. Kimmel sensed something off. He cleared his throat, gesturing for her to respond. Caroline, what do you think, Trump's person or your own? He tilted his head, anticipating an awkward moment. Leavitt stood, the lights illuminating her like a torch. She gripped the microphone, her voice rising, resonant like a speech. Jimmy, you think my loyalty to Trump is a weakness? She asked, her tone defiant. I call it conviction. I stand with a man who's fought for America, for values you'll never understand. I'm not a fan, I'm an ally of the truth. She turned to face Carrey, her gaze as if piercing through the caricature. And you, Jim, Think I just nod along? I've stood with Trump through the darkest days when the world turned its back. I don't nod. I stand up, fight, and win. What about you? Who are you loyal to besides your own ego? The audience gasped, applause surging like a wave. Leavitt paced slowly across the stage, her voice rising, captivating like an orator. You mock me for being loyal to Trump. I'm proud of it. He's the one daring to confront the elite, the media like you, who sneer at the American people. I'm not here to stand alone, like you want, Jimmy. I'm here to represent millions who believe in him, who believe in a stronger America. She paused, her gaze sweeping the audience, drawing them into her story. Loyalty isn't slavery, it's the strength to change things together. Kimmel, trying to stay composed, interjected. Caroline, but, I mean, don't you ever question Trump, just follow orders. He forced a laugh, hoping to regain the upper hand. But Leavitt gave him no chance. She stepped closer to Kimmel's desk, her eyes like fire. Question, Jimmy? I question every day. How media like you distort the truth. How Hollywood mocks people like me. But with Trump, I don't need to question. I see him fight for the people, despite every attack. I choose to stand with him, not because of orders, but because of belief. She raised her hand, emphasizing her point. And you, who are you loyal to? Your audience or the ones paying you to read scripts? The crowd cheered, laughter now aimed at Kimmel, making him lower his head, fingers tapping the desk. Carrey, trying to salvage the moment, spoke up. Caroline, you talk a good game, but loyalty to Trump just makes you his mouthpiece. Don't you have your own opinions? He pointed at the caricature, hoping to spark laughter. But Leavitt was ready, his mouthpiece. Jim. I'm the voice of millions of Americans you ignore. I don't need separate opinions because my beliefs are theirs. Belief in an America not manipulated by people like you. She turned to the audience, voice brimming with passion. I'm loyal to Trump because he's loyal to us. You laugh at that. Go ahead. But your laughter can't drown out our voices. Kimmel, now completely on the ropes, said, Caroline, you're very passionate. Leavitt held up her phone. Jim, she said, voice radiating strength. Millions are sharing this story, not because I'm a fanatic, but because they see themselves in me. That's the power of loyalty. Power you'll never understand. Carrey, for the first time, didn't respond. Standing silently by his sketchpad, the caricature now like an outdated prop. Kimmel, his smile stiff, tried to mask his panic and regain composure, leaning forward with a hint of mockery in his tone. Caroline, you've done well, I'll give you that, he said, eyes glinting as if he'd found a crack. You're a young woman in politics, right? A MAGA star, as your fans say. But be honest, don't you feel like you're just decoration for Trump's image? A pretty face to soften his edges. Carrey, seizing the moment, said, Caroline, I get it, his voice feigning friendliness. Politics is a big stage, and you're the perfect prop. Beautiful, young, ready to play backdrop for the boss. MAGA women like you are just good for show, right? Leavitt sat there, hands resting lightly on her chair, her gaze steady, like a general before the final battle. Kimmel gestured for her to respond. Caroline, what do you think? Just a pretty face for Trump. Leavitt's voice rang out, powerful and inspiring. Jimmy, you think I'm just decoration? She asked, her tone brimming with strength. I'm the youngest woman to run the White House press room, facing global media, shaping America's narrative. I don't play backdrop, I lead. She turned to Carrey, her eyes as if tearing through the caricature. And you, Jim, think MAGA women are just for show. I've stood up in high-stakes briefings, fighting for the truth, while you're just holding a brush, painting stereotypes. Women like me, from Elise Stefanik to Melania Trump, are rewriting history, not posing as props for anyone. Leavitt stepped closer to the audience, her voice rising, full of passion. You call me Trump's doll? I'm the voice of millions of American women, mothers, teachers, entrepreneurs, who don't need Hollywood's approval to shine. We're not here to prettify anyone's image. We're here to fight, to lead, to change. She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd, as if inviting them to stand with her. MAGA women aren't props, we're fire, and that fire is burning. Kimmel, trying to cut in, said, "Caroline, I don't mean to offend, but don't you think your role is a bit overhyped? Women in MAGA are just part of Trump's machine, right?" She strode to Kimmel's desk, her eyes like a storm. "Overhyped, Jimmy. I've broken historic records, stood at the White House podium, led national media at 27. That's not a machine, that's my power, the power of women like me. And you? What do you do, besides read scripts, and think women are only good for show?" She raised her hand, voice commanding. "MAGA women don't need you to define us. We define ourselves, and we're shaping America." The audience roared, laughter now aimed at Kimmel, making him lower his head, fingers tapping the desk. Carrey, desperate, spoke up. "Caroline, but women like you are just tools to help Trump win votes. Don't you see you're being used?" "Tools, Jim? I'm the woman who stood tall when the world tried to pull me down. I'm the woman who turned the press room into a battlefield and won. Trump doesn't use me, he trusts me, as I trust him." She turned to the audience, voice full of inspiration. "MAGA women aren't used, we're a force, the future, and we don't need your pity." Kimmel forced a smile. "Caroline, you're truly impressive," he said, but his eyes betrayed defeat. Leavitt sat down, her gaze still locked on the two comedians, as if to say, "I've won." Overwhelmed by Caroline's dominance, Kimmel tried to close the show with a weak joke, but his eyes revealed panic and powerlessness. Carrey, standing by his sketchpad, quietly packed up, his final caricature now just a useless piece of paper. As the show ended, clips of Leavitt's showdown spread across social media at lightning speed. Within hours, videos of her clapping back at Kimmel and Carrey racked up tens of millions of views, from her retort on youth to her powerful affirmation of MAGA women. The MAGA community, newly energized, turned every moment into a weapon. They churned out memes, a shot of Kimmel with his head down, captioned "When Caroline shuts you up," an image of Carrey by his sketchpad, labeled "Out of Time Jim." TikTokers danced to MAGA-themed tracks, overlaying Leavitt's quote, "MAGA women don't play backdrop, we lead." Leavitt, back from the show, didn't rest. She opened her phone, scrolling through the social media flood, eyes blazing. With a carefully crafted post, she wrote, "Kimmel and Carrey thought they could make me a punchline, but I represent millions of Americans who don't bow to Hollywood. Thank you for standing with me." The post included a highlight reel of her 4 takedowns of the comedians, from her jab about youth to her declaration for women. Within minutes, the post garnered millions of likes, shared by MAGA supporters, from housewives in Ohio to truckers in Texas. The MAGA community didn't stop. They dug up Kimmel's controversial moments, like comedy bits criticized for sexism, and Carrey's, like caricatures once called offensive. One account wrote, "Kimmel dares call Caroline a mascot. Look at yourself." Another viral meme showed Carrey drawing Leavitt, only to be redrawn by her as a clown with the caption, "Who's the real joke?" MAGA TikTok groups launched challenges, urging users to recreate her studio lines. A young Florida girl posted a video mimicking Leavitt's voice, "I don't need Hollywood's approval." It quickly hit 1 million views, amplifying Leavitt's message. Kimmel, seeing the online storm, tried to counter. He posted, "Fun night. Caroline's tough, but we were just joking, folks." But the post was buried under MAGA comments. "Joking, she knocked you out. Caroline won hands down." Carrey, known for his caricatures, tried posting a new sketch, Leavitt as a social media queen, but it only drew more backlash. One user wrote, "Jim, put the brush down. She's won." Carrey's engagement plummeted, while Leavitt's post kept spreading. Some Hollywood stars, like Stephen Colbert, jumped to defend Kimmel and Carrey. Colbert posted, "Caroline's good at arguing, but comedy is art, not war." But MAGA fired back fiercely, calling him an elitist hypocrite. Leavitt, seizing the moment, posted again, "Hollywood thinks they can lecture us on art. We're the art of truth and strength." The post, paired with a photo of her on the studio stage, racked up millions of shares. Meanwhile, left-leaning journalists tried writing pieces defending Kimmel and Carrey, calling Leavitt Trump's aggressive mouthpiece. But these articles were mere breezes against the MAGA storm. Leavitt, monitoring every development, smiled. She knew she hadn't just won on stage. She was shaping the global narrative. The social media storm Caroline Leavitt ignited after her showdown on Jimmy Kimmel Live kept spreading. At 27, Caroline turned Kimmel and Carrey's mockery into a springboard, dominating social media and millions of MAGA shares. The Hollywood studio, once the comedian's arena, was now just a memory of their defeat. Kimmel, with his forced smile, and Carrey, with his forgotten sketchpad, were outshined by Leavitt. But the storm didn't stop. The battle peaked as the two Hollywood giants were forced to retreat, leaving Leavitt standing tall as an unbeatable icon. Kimmel and Carrey, once icons of Hollywood comedy, were now seen as relics of a bygone era. Kimmel's ratings kept plummeting, with viewers turning away for disrespecting strong women like Caroline. Carrey, hoping to reposition himself through art, saw his exhibitions canceled amid controversy. One user wrote, "Caroline didn't just win, they're done." Meanwhile, Leavitt became MAGA's new icon, hailed as the flag of truth. The storm Caroline Leavitt sparked on Jimmy Kimmel Live subsided, but its echoes resonated across America. Caroline didn't just defeat Kimmel and Carrey on Hollywood's stage. She turned that victory into a movement spreading through social media, television, and the hearts of millions of MAGA supporters. Kimmel, with tanking ratings and an ineffective apology, became a shadow of himself. Carrey, with his forgotten caricatures, chose to retreat from the spotlight. Meanwhile, Leavitt stood firm, not just a victor but a symbol of a new generation ready to shape the future. From her White House office, Leavitt looked out at the world, eyes full of resolve. The studio victory wasn't just a dazzling night. It was a spark igniting faith for those long ignored by the elite. She had turned mockery of her youth, MAGA style, loyalty to Trump, and role as a woman into proof of her strength. Leavitt understood that her legacy lay in her ability to unite and empower. At a MAGA event in Florida, she stood before thousands, her voice ringing like a bell. "Hollywood thinks they can define us," she declared, eyes blazing. "But we ordinary Americans are rewriting our own story. We don't need their approval. We have the power of truth." The crowd roared, hoisting banners reading "Caroline, our voice." Her victory also shook up perceptions of women in politics. Leavitt became a role model for MAGA women, from single mothers to young entrepreneurs, who saw in her strength and resolve. A group of women in Texas founded a scholarship in her name to support young girls pursuing leadership careers. One post read, "Caroline isn't just a press secretary, she's a beacon for women like us." MAGA TikTokers kept spreading the message, with videos splicing images of Leavitt and other movement women, from Elise Stefanik to Melania Trump, as a declaration, MAGA women are a force not to be underestimated. By leveraging online platforms, she proved that the people's voice could transcend traditional media's limits. MAGA commentators praised her as the architect of truth, paving the way for a generation of leaders using social media to connect directly with the public. Standing before a mirror in her office, Leavitt smiled. She knew her journey was just beginning. The victory on Jimmy Kimmel Live wasn't just a milestone, it was a proclamation that a young woman, with faith and resolve, could change a nation. She gazed at the horizon, where the MAGA movement was growing, and whispered, "We're only getting started." Leavitt's legacy wasn't a night in Hollywood, it was a fire that would burn forever in the hearts of those who believe in truth. The story of Caroline Leavitt's clash with Jimmy Kimmel and Jim Carrey on Jimmy Kimmel Live deeply reflects the cultural and political tensions in America today, especially the divide between traditional values, the MAGA movement, and Hollywood's elite. In the story, Leavitt, a 27-year-old woman, not only defended herself against mockery of her age, MAGA media style, loyalty to Trump, and role as a woman, but turned them into weapons to assert her strength. She used the stage, social media, and media to amplify her message, galvanize the MAGA community, and ultimately force Kimmel and Carrey to retreat in defeat. Her victory showcases the power of resolve, leveraging technology, and belief in personal values in a polarized society. The lesson from this story is, in a world divided by ideology, every American can drive change by standing up for their beliefs and using modern platforms to connect with their community. Like Leavitt, who turned mockery into opportunity, we must confidently face prejudice and not let elite criticism shake our values. Her use of X and TikTok to amplify her message reminds us that social media can be a powerful tool for building connections, especially when traditional media doesn't represent all voices. Moreover, Leavitt's image inspires young women, and the scholarship in her name underscores that anyone can lead, regardless of age or gender, if they dare to act. In real-life America, take a page from Leavitt, hold fast to your beliefs, use technology to connect, and turn challenges into chances to shine. Subscribe to the channel to cheer on bold voices like Caroline Leavitt, fighting for truth. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where we'll keep exploring inspiring stories.